Welcome, everyone, to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. In Hebrew, our name is Abitchonistim. IDSF is the leading Israeli organization advocating for strong national security to defend the state of Israel. It's a great pleasure to be joined today by Yissachar, who is the head of IDSF Research. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Moshe. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Welcome back to Israel. I know you were just doing some important travel, and hopefully you can share a little bit about that with our audience. And we have a lot to discuss. In the research department, you really cover an extensive amount of material throughout this war. So please, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Thank you, Moshe. Toda rabah. So hi, everyone. I'm very pleased to see all of you here today. As Moshe just said, I just came back yesterday from quite a significant trip to Europe. And I'm going to discuss today with you touch upon some of the topics that I mentioned in some of the lectures that I gave. Let's first begin by understanding the framing, because mostly the most prominent question, as you can probably imagine, that I heard was, what's the day after in Gaza going to look like? And how is the region going to react to Israel? If you claim Israel needs to win the war, how is the region going to react? Is it going to push peace with Saudi Arabia, situation with the Houthis, with the Hezbollah, Iran, etc.? It's going to push Israel's prospects further away from peace, or actually it's going to bring peace closer still. Let me just begin with this very, I believe always you need to visualize your message. So let's begin with this slide that I think encapsulates the whole story. Most people see what's going on in Gaza today as an Israel-Gaza war, and they enjoy, propagating disinformation, just like happened yesterday in Rafah, propagating disinformation about what's going on there. But I believe the story is much, much wider than that. I believe what's going on here is in the first Israel-Iran war. This expression, the first Israel-Iran war, we IDSF used from the very beginning, from October 7, because we saw how the Gaza theater, though with the highest military intensity, is but one theater of an entire campaign instigated by Iran. So you have Hezbollah in Lebanon, who has already fired over 4,000 rockets, drones, anti-tank missiles, killing at least 14 Israeli soldiers and 6 civilians. You can learn, by the way, about all of these stats in our website, the war database. It's called warinIsrael.org. I really welcome you go online and check out this database. So you got Hezbollah in Lebanon, you got the Houthis in Yemen, who just yesterday fired yet another drone at Israel. You got the militias in Iraq, just yesterday fired a drone at Eilat in southern Israel. And you've got, of course, Syria, who is the staging ground for Iranian attacks. The Palestinian Authority is not part of the Iranian campaign. They are Fatah is not directly involved with Iran in that sense, but it is an extremely radical actor who is actually encouraging and funding terrorism itself. You see how senior officials in the Palestinian Authority, we had a whole discussion about it, I remember a few months ago, encouraging terrorism, paying for terrorism. The pay for slay $370 million per year as stipends to terrorists. When I told to my friends in Europe, they were shocked. They would say, I asked them, how much do you think that PA pays terrorists? They would say, like, I don't know, let's say 100 grand per year. They couldn't imagine. And of course, Iran itself. On April 14, as you remember, Iran launched a wholesale attack on Israel, 350 cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and drones at Israel. It claims to have responded to an attack by Israel on its senior military official, Hossein Mahdavi. But in an IRGC facility near the consulate in Damascus, as we're well aware, Iran has been a puppet master behind all of these theaters ever since October 7, and for the past basically 40 years. We've been seeing these things clearly. So basically, whoever controls the framing controls the narrative, in my opinion. And instead of framing it as an Israel-Hamas war, in my opinion, this is the West's war against the radical axis, Russia, China, and Iran. So it affects the freedom of navigation in Bab el-Mandeb by the Houthis in the Red Sea. We already see navigation, like shipping companies who are bypassing the African Horn, reaching Europe instead of through the Red Sea, not to be exposed to Houthis, hijacking their ships and shooting ground-to-sea missiles. We can already see how China and Russia are signing strategic pacts between themselves, signing with Iran as well. Iran being actually a player, an actor, an active player in the Ukraine theater, supplying Russia with drones and ballistic missiles to attack Kyiv and other places in Ukraine. And so this is really what we're supposed to be, how we're supposed to be looking at this. Israel and Ukraine are the front, really standing in the front line of defense of the West against the radical axis. The United States, France, Germany, all these other countries should see it and frame the issue this way. Israel is not waging war in Gaza because it has no value for Palestinian lives and all the claims we hear on campuses. We actually are here in order to safeguard the future of Israel and the future of the West. This is how we should frame it. We are fighting, Israel and Ukraine are fighting the same war, in my opinion, but as we saw, the gaps between the statements are insurmountable. So, for example, I hear many prominent politicians in the West say that we should be helping Ukraine for as long as it takes. And one can support it, one can oppose to that. But then they are pressuring Israel to wrap up the war as quickly as possible. So this doesn't add up. They call it an arms embargo to Israel while signing off another aid package to Ukraine. So unless they understand this is a common battle, I don't think we can go anywhere. And one last word about the day after in Gaza. So I think it's a fair question to ask Israel. How do you think the war in Gaza is going to play out? Okay, let's say you won. You took down through the Hamas senior leadership. As far as I'm concerned, there are 5 of them, which is Yahya Sinwar, Mohammed Def, Marwan Issa, Sinwar's brother, and actually there's 4 of them. But then Marwan Issa, one of them was taken down in an IDF precision airstrike on a tunnel. They made sure through intelligence, quite remarkably, that there are no hostages near Marwan Issa in that tunnel. And you got Mohammed Def, Yahya Sinwar, who are probably hiding in a tunnel, possibly, as some pundits suggested, with Israeli hostages surrounding them as human shields. Once the Hamas leadership is taken down, once the Hamas governmental and military structures are collapsed and crushed, this has to happen. Then we can talk about the day after in Gaza. We, the IDSF, are constantly talking to Israeli and worldwide politicians about our vision for the day after in Gaza. In my opinion, we shouldn't be too elaborate about it. We shouldn't be crossing the T's and dotting the I's right now as we speak. The goal right now is total victory over Hamas. And then, and the release of the hostages, of course. Then we can talk about the day after. In my opinion, there should be a very clear structure there. The IDSF and General Avivi, we all have been saying it for the past 7 months. The IDF needs to have a total freedom of operation in the Gaza Strip. That's the day after in Gaza. The same way that Israeli troops are entering Jenin and Nablus, arresting terrorists, lawn mowing, as we say in the military slang. This is the same way we should be able to enter Gaza, enter Khan Yunis, enter Rafah with 3 jeeps, get off the jeep, enter the apartment, arrest the terrorists, and leave. We haven't been doing this stuff in Gaza for the past 15 to 20 years. And intensively more so since January 1996, when as per the Oslo Accords, Israel left the city centers of the Palestinian cities and basically asked the PA to be its contractor and foil terrorism on its behalf. That hasn't manifestly failed. That hasn't worked. And so Israel can no longer deposit its security in the hands of others. That's on the military plane. On the civil plane, one has to have de-radicalization in the education system. A friend of mine just today sent me a photo of Mein Kampf in Arabic. This book, written by Adolf Hitler, of course, his radical anti-Semitic vision for the world, is bestseller in Gaza. In every single house in Gaza, you can find a copy of Mein Kampf in Arabic. So this is not normal. This is not normal, and this is a society in schools, in summer camps, ever since the age of 3, starting from the age of 3 to adulthood, they are teaching their children to be to become Hamas terrorists. So this can no longer continue, and I'm expecting Arab countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, even Jordan and Egypt, to step in to this civilian effort, hand out humanitarian aid, dissolve UNRWA, dissolve Hamas, and really herald a new vision for the Gaza Strip. And finally, I don't think there should be a Palestinian state there. Our generals have been assessing the issue for decades now, even before the IDSF was founded. Palestinian state means Israel clears the area again, lets Hamas metastasize again, let's Gaza become a terrorist hub again. This cannot be allowed to happen. We had October 7th once. We cannot serve the other cheek. This is not a security strategy. It's not a viable security strategy. And Palestinians can run really effectively their civilian lives in their localities, in their townships, in their cities, local control, paying salaries, taking care of paychecks and sewage, and administrative work, but they cannot be allowed to carry weapons. They cannot be the security of Israel cannot be deposited in their hands. I think really this is a brand new approach to the future of Gaza. What's so unfortunate to me is to see both some former Israeli generals who are not IDSF, who've been pushing this quite defeatism, in my opinion, for the past few years, and some prominent world leaders who are saying Israel cannot extinguish an idea, Israel cannot win in Gaza, it must strive for a ceasefire now, and simply accept the fact that it is subject to a genocidal attack every once in a while, like October 7th. And since we seek life, and we don't wish to see another threat metastasize in Gaza, this is really the only way to go about it. I would like to separate really the ideal and the real. Ideally, the Palestinians would be governing themselves entirely 100%. Realistically, they've proven themselves incapable of governing. And in my opinion, this is the only way to go about it. With that, happy to take your questions.
Or thank you so much for sharing all of this. I want to go back to that idea about it's all in the framing. So, the IDF obviously stands for the Israel Defense Force. And for years and years and years, the messaging out of the Israeli defense establishment is it's about defense, defense, defense. And now in this war, we're talking about destroying Hamas. And so it's shifted. And you're saying the messaging needs to shift not to destroying Hamas, but to destroy this big axis. But I guess the question I would ask is, should we be abandoning this model of defense? We shouldn't be talking about defend the West or save the Middle East. And we should use this more aggressive language in your new framing. Is that what you're finding people resonate with?
I'm confident of that, because when I spoke just now in Hungary and in Austria, and it's true that many people in the audience were, in Hebrew we say barging into an open door. So they were already kind of convinced, but then I actually helped them reframe the issue, and they, despite their intuitive support of Israel, a lot of the things I said there were quite new to them. One of the things that I think impressed them the most, with our rhetoric, the IDSF, we've been pushing, you call it an aggressive rhetoric. I take it as a compliment, because even in US campuses, I remember, in one of the campuses, there was a Jewish leadership who came on stage and started talking very seriously about these pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas protesters and saying, we're not going to bend to you, and we're proud Jewish Americans. And one of the things that I felt was that kind of thing is missing. Like, we are apologists. We've been apologists for decades now. When they go low, we go high. All these slogans who are trying to not to go down to their level. I don't think that works. When pro-Palestinian protesters actually tried to blow up our event last week in Budapest, many of the organizers were first, quite shocked. They never expected that to happen in Hungary. But then they also tried to say, well, let's engage in a dialogue. And that obviously didn't work, because these guys came to yell and to, take videos of themselves and upload it to social media. And what I told them is that I'm not impressed by their yelling, because usually we yell when the truth hurts. And that, to be honest, we're done being Jews on trembling knees. That's Menachem Begin, who told Senator Joe Biden 40 years ago, we're done being Jews on trembling knees. We're wearing uniform, and we're ready to fight. And this kind of language is not, when you're a squeegee, people mop the floor with you. I think really the message of Israel needs to be a leader in the West. Stop being the underdog. And really, we can discuss the details, but I think this should be the attitude.
Okay, so maybe we'll have to start calling it the Israel Offense Forces. Let's talk about another issue within this framing, which I think is such a fascinating idea. This is the first Israel-Iran war, as you suggested. But as we know, 2006, there was the Lebanon war, Hezbollah and Iran behind the scenes. So I'm wondering, in terms of this new framing, the first Israel-Iran war, as opposed to the second, third, fourth, fifth, what are the benefits of that you're seeing in terms of engaging with people, disconnecting this potentially from previous rounds of the conflict?
Absolutely. I think let's look at it this way. As we are seeing the different pieces of the puzzle, we can see that Hamas is but a proxy of Iran. It is not simply an Israel-Hamas issue because we're seeing the attacks from the Lebanese border. Just yesterday, we saw attacks by militias like the Houthis in Yemen and militias in Iraq, attacks from the part of Syria and Iran itself. So it is a whole global campaign. And I think part of it is also a delegitimization campaign in US campuses and around the streets of Europe. So all these things really I can see how the dots connect here. But yeah, in previous rounds of conflict, as you said, rounds of combat, Hamas's strategy was what we call the coalescence of fronts. So basically try to create a more and more pressure on Israel by connecting the fronts. So let's say in 2021, there was a big uproar about the official excuse was the neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah in Jerusalem and the intention to evacuate Palestinian residents there. Obviously, it was a lie. It was a reframing of the issue, and it controlled the narrative because some in the Western media loved that idea of Israel evicting Palestinians from their homes. It was actually people who were, who were actually barging into real estate that wasn't theirs, and they were asked to evacuate several times. They didn't pay rent, then they had no right to be there. But then Hamas, especially in the heat of Ramadan and the Al-Quds Day and Jerusalem Day, managed to frame it as a battle between Judaism and Islam, and then instigated riots on Temple Mount Har HaBayit in Jerusalem. And then once Israeli officers came into the Temple Mount to really arrest those rioters who were endangering Muslim worshippers as well, Hamas fired rockets from Gaza. And then it fired rockets from southern Lebanon. So really the Hamas Palestinian branch there. So they tried to create this linkage between events in Jerusalem, Gaza, and Lebanon. If you do something in Jerusalem, you should know that the Gaza front will be open, the Lebanon front will be open, Judea and Samaria will burn. And so all these things are like we're seeing right now. A Gaza theater has ramifications in Lebanon, Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Judea and Samaria, Jerusalem, and Iran itself. So all these things really are combined as per their strategy.
I want to thank all of our viewers and supporters who are sending in questions. And we always have a tremendous backlog of questions and issues to talk about. So thank you, of course, for all of that. Or a lot of people want to really understand, in terms of Iran's involvement in this war, since October 7th, is Iran more deterred now than they were? Or maybe they have a greater stockpile of uranium. Maybe they have a better understanding of Israel's vulnerabilities. What is the status of Iran right now, to the best that you can share with us? I know, of course, there are things you can't share, but that which you can share, what would you say?
Let me put it this way. Let's take a look at two things going on with Iran. One is that the West is losing deterrence big time, big time. One of the things that shocked me was to see the most powerful, superpowers in the world, US, France, UK, bending down to Iran, which is not as powerful a country as one might imagine, just because, as former President Obama said to the Atlantic in 2016, not to be dragged to another war in the Middle East. And so what I was shocked to see how this unwillingness to see another war, it actually invites war, like Ronald Reagan said. I mean, prepare for war. If you want to see peace, prepare for war. Establishing deterrence. All these fundamental tenets need to be, fundamentals really in Western defense doctrine historically, especially since World War II, as it have been collapsing, and Iran has been sensing that. Russia and China have been sensing that. I suspect that the Ukraine war would not have happened without this, um, without the West not showing deterrence vis-a-vis Iran as well. Signing off this really preposterous Iran nuclear deal has shown them that, we are willing to look the other way as you enrich more uranium, as you become more aggressive, just to sign up and just look the other way and sweep the problem under the rug. So this is really what has been really surprising to me to see in the past few years. And then increasingly since October 7, where I said, and all of us in the IDSF said, that if you want the war to end soon, pressure Iran, not Israel. I told that to members of the European Parliament 2 months ago. You are not talking about Iran at all, at all. If Iran gives one word, the war in the north and in the south will be over. And it is not, obviously, and the West is not putting pressure on Iran. As far as I hear, U.S. officials are meeting, clandestinely, Iranian officials in Oman and Dubai and other places to assuage them and try to buy off their tacit silence, I would call it. The other thing we saw is that Iran is not as powerful as it seemed, especially on April 14th, the IDF and the region with me, the Middle East Air Defense, successfully thwarted virtually all of the Iranian targets that were launched, drones, missiles. And this is really the key. I will warn you that Iran was never allowed to acquire nuclear weapons. It has been increasingly enriching uranium. We learn it from IAEA reports, hundreds of kilos of 20% and 60% enriched uranium, to the point where they could, if they want, get enough material for 3 nuclear bombs within several weeks. So this is really an alarming situation. It must never be accepted, and it is not an Israeli interest. That's what people have to understand after all these years. It is not an Israeli interest. It's a Western interest to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. It's as simple as that.
In terms of deterrence for Iran, is there any reasonable expectation that that could be provided from the Arab world, who have a mutual interest in suppressing Iran, let's say the Saudis, or are we really exclusively thinking about Israel, the US, and European countries?
Absolutely, the Arab world has to be involved, in my opinion. One of the things the IDSF and General Avivi have been saying constantly is that a way out of this situation would not just be Israel fighting Iran. That's easy. An easy thought, maybe. We need to see a coalition, regional coalition, led by the United States, that includes Israel and the Arab countries. We saw in the Arab Accords how Arab countries neglected their old, dogmas of fighting Israel as means to survive, and they actually embraced a doctrine of rapprochement to Israel in order to survive. And they can tell that despite all their rhetoric and all the grave statements about how terrible Israel is and what it's doing in Gaza, they really are concerned about Iran. So they cannot keep this facade going. They understand full well that Israel is not a security threat on them. It's Iran who is putting billions and billions of dollars every year to instigate this instability in Saudi Arabia, in the UAE. It tried to topple the regime in Bahrain. It's all over the place. So absolutely, Arab world has to step in. And it's their responsibility. They've been enjoying not to be involved for years. There has not been an expectation for them to be involved. Take the future of Gaza, you mentioned. I think Arab countries must be involved, creating an international partnership in this Gaza Strip. They enjoy that all of the burden is on Israel's shoulders, and honestly, the world needs to expect them to man up and take responsibility. It's very easy to throw everything on Israel's responsibility, but to be honest, the Arab world has to be much more heavily implied in the region and in the Gaza Strip.
Well, Yissachar, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been very fascinating to hear all of this. I will remind all of our viewers that Or had referenced earlier the Israel War Portal, which is a project of IDSF. And if you are on our newsletter, you regularly should be receiving links to important publications that go up on that site. If you're not on our newsletter, now is an opportunity to sign up at idsf.org.il. We send out those links all the time. And that way, in addition to these Zoom briefings, you can really see this data that we share. Or thank you so much for joining. Thank you to all the viewers and supporters. We will be back with you 10 a.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Israel time tomorrow. We're going to be doing a deep dive on what is happening in Europe. We'll be joined by Ambassador Eli Yerushalmi. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.